Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Season 2 finale of SurrealEstate. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we're immediately picking up where this last episode left off, and Susan and Luke are talking, and Susan's just making it seem like, oh yeah, I was on vacation, I'm back, I'm refreshed, I'm ready to get back into work. Because I thought Luke had picked up on it, like, because he knew something was off. He went to the house and everything, but I guess maybe the argument that Luke might have is I think it's because he was afraid of pushing Susan away because he did before, and I think he didn't want to make that mistake again, so he's like, right, let's just let her ease back into it. He knows something was up with the house, but maybe he was also thinking he's like, maybe I didn't want to believe that was Susan, but maybe it really was, or maybe I was picking up on something, like maybe there is something to the house, but maybe Susan was never really in danger. The house is something, but it's not I don't know. I think Luke just didn't want to push too hard. He knew something was up, but Zoe confronted her like, right, I went to your house. It's like, and like Susan almost turned it against Zoe, being like, oh, you broke into my house? Because my immediate thought last episode, if you didn't hear my review, I was like, oh, it's got to be like a clone of Susan, right? They melded it together so well that it's like, oh, you literally made a copy. Turns out that's not the case. I thought that was an interesting twist where it's like, no, it's not even like a copy of Susan. It is Susan. It's just the house is in possession of her. She's become more house than herself, right? I mean, I guess that's a symbiosis of it all, where it's like the house is trying to become more her and her more of the house. It's like we're one, so they're kind of occupying the same body, and it's controlling her, and it's just she's acting not Susan-y because the way she's acting with Lomax even being like, well, if you're a real estater staying in the office, you might as well be dead, and Lomax is like, that's kind of a bleak motivational speech, and then Phil was like, oh yeah, I can do this thing for you, Susan. It's a normie house, but I can do it. I got to take my daughter to a doctor thing. And Susan was like, no, you're going to do it now. You're not going to make me wait. And Phil's like, no, if this was a me thing, we would have a conversation, but this isn't about me. This is about my child. So slow your roll. And she's like, okay, fine. And she's like, yep, Susan's not acting like Susan. And everyone's kind of picking up on that. Even later on, she disrespects Zoe by being like, yeah, you're going to do this and that. And Zoe's like, who are you talking to? It's like, you. Like, the fact of the matter is, you're not an actual real estate agent, so, if you're not that, like, and you're not, picking up my cleaning and doing my dry cleaning, then what are you here for? Which is obviously mad disrespectful, especially considering, hey, Zoe got registered, like, took the test, passed and everything, and actually could have been a realtor, was for a little bit, but then kind of was like, nah, I don't want to do that, so it's extra disrespectful, especially considering you've missed so much of her journey over the course of this season. So for you to come back now, you only been back like a day, and smack talking is just not quite right. So you can tell something was off in that capacity. Everyone was kind of feeling it. And so it's not until Luke was visiting her later on, because it turns out the house wants her to get rid of her friends. She's like, they're my friends. It's like, no, Susan, they're a distraction. You need to focus on all of this. You need to focus on us. We have to, get rid of them. And while Luke was there, he heard her on the inside screaming. So later on, Luke, which sadly this was after Augie had like a meeting with Susan, like to check something out, but he ended up, like, and it's so sad too, because she was fighting it, because the house was like trying to get her to push August off the ledge, like kill her friends, because by severing all those connections, it's like eventually, I guess you would assume it would have asked her to kill her mom too. I'm surprised they didn't write her mom more into the story, considering everything that was going on. But I guess it's like, I don't know, I just thought that was kind of interesting. I would have thought her mom would have played some key role in kind of pulling Susan back, but I guess it's like more important that her friends be the one to do it. Because maybe the house was making her mom think like everything was hunky-dory, everything was super okay, so maybe she was kind of fooled by it as well, and just, it's like, right, I'm going to give Susan space to live her life, so she probably, much like Luke, was, for different reasons, similar reasons, but also from different circumstances of like, well, Luke and her weren't in a good place, so I'm going to give you space, versus her mom being like, I'm going to let my daughter live her life, and, which also this episode had nothing to do with what I thought too. I thought it was going to, last episode I was like, maybe this has something to do with her dad, because we know she has some kind of special connection to this house. I think it's probably just the house took notice of her a long time ago, and it's not until she finally came back that the house latched onto her. We'll get into all of that in a little bit about why that is, but I mean, once again, luckily August wasn't pushed by Susan because she was able to restrain herself enough, but his device picked up on something, but he wasn't sure what. So the all hands on meeting, it's like, right, this isn't Susan, like, basically, well, it is kind of Susan. It's all the ambition, all kind of like the work related, but also kind of negative aspects of Susan, which it's none of the humanity to kind of balance it out. So the thing is, they can't use the original plan of trying to remove Susan from the house. Removing the house from Susan, if they used the device they were planning on using last episode, it would kill her. So they have to adjust on the fly, and so there's that. Phil is going to come at it from since this is a possession situation, he can come at it from the exorcist side of things. What I thought was interesting, though, is that speaking of Phil, he got visited by a priest who was like, basically it goes back to his mentor, Father Diaz, and a book he had written about possession and stuff, and apparently Phil had edited, so it's like, apparently there's been more and more children being possessed in the world, which makes you wonder if there's some correlation in some grander scheme of like the supernatural world. Maybe, maybe not. There's obviously going to be like some overlap to some extent, but either way, Phil doesn't want to move to Rome to do this job, like, because obviously the church would give him access to so much, and even when I wore the cloth, I never got like access to like this like library of knowledge you're going to let me have access to, and it's like, right, we're that serious about it. That should show you how dire the situation is, because they're trying to say like, right, you as an outsider with your spiritual distance, you could be kind of an asset in some regards. So I guess maybe he would deal with a lot less scrutiny, just because it's like, right, you're kind of being brought in under special conditions and circumstances. So, but it would also be like, yeah, your family would relocate too, so that's something he's gonna have to talk to Anthony about. I think it's kind of poetic, not poetic, it's interesting too that he would get this opportunity after like having a confrontation with his sister this season, especially because that confrontation kind of came in conflict with his family circumstances, especially when he walked away from the cloth, and obviously him being, his sexuality and everything in his life not being too copacetic with the church in some capacity. So just for him to kind of end up here in this situation, and I think it also kind of speaks volumes that, like, right, we need you because of your connection to Father Diaz and stuff, and you edited this particular book. It's almost like think of like, yeah, we'll overlook the homosexuality of it all. It's not just, it's like, but I guess it's like, considering like what it's all about, the fact of the matter is you're going to be able to save so many kids who are being possessed like crazy around the world. So, and obviously the circumstances with Susan really pushed that decision. I think for Phil, he won't be as involved. He'll be handling things he won't be as hands-on like he is sometimes. Like, yes, he's the book guy, like he does the research and stuff, but he's still pretty hands-on with a lot of the house stuff that they deal with, part of the Roman agency. So I think, at least with the church, because he got caught up in the car situation with Susan, it's scaring the ever-living crap out of him, like speeding like crazy. So what were you guys talking about at the meeting? It's like, no, we told you what we were talking about. I love that when that came to that meeting, that particular meeting, it's like, oh, what are you guys talking about? It's like, oh yeah, we're talking about Elsa's house, and oh yeah, you'll hear all about it from Lomax, and Lomax is almost like, wow, you're leaving me with her, and just kind of smiling like, yay. But when it's all said and done, like, Phil was scared, and he's just like, right, I can't do this again. Like, not only am I husband, like, that's always been one situation, but it's like, now that he's a father, it makes it like, no, I've got to be around to protect my daughter, so I can't be putting myself in very, very dangerous situations. So I guess that's the justification for Phil. Like, I'm going to be a lot less hands-on. I'm pretty hands-off in some capacities with the job, but I'm still pretty hands-on, at least going back to the church to work for them. I will definitely be a lot more hands-off, because I definitely don't want to get too caught up in these directly with these demonic possession situations. I think also as a father too, I think they probably know about him being a father now, so they knew they would probably tug on his heartstrings, considering the subject matter, a whole bunch of kids getting possessed and stuff. So there's also that element of like, I was about to say, I won't go too far in it, but it's also like, church, children, kind of, it's almost like a little like, oh, I don't know if irony would be the word. It's just kind of like a little, I'll leave it at that. That just, it's just kind of interesting. I also love their backup plan was Elsa, and I love that she's like, "Wait, are you trying to get me to move into a naughty, try to be a human sacrifice to this naughty house?" And Lomax just pauses for a second and just leans in. That is not what we said, and it's like, it kind of is and it kind of isn't, because it's like, hey, this could be your forever home. Like, I mean, you can live forever, and this house needs someone to be there forever. So because Luke by this time learned the truth about the house, he met Rabbit, what was it, Rabbitfoot, which is actually kind of sad when you find out. He's like, yeah, my great-great-grandfather, when he went to Ellis Island, one of the people had trouble pronouncing his name. So apparently family legend goes that basically my great-great-grandfather had like a lucky charm. And because of that, that's how our family got our last name. I was like, that, and even Luke's like, that's effed up. And he's like, yeah, luckily, because in some cultures, the phallus is seen as the lucky charm. So I guess we're fortunate in that regard. But he built the home, and it belonged to this Norwegian woman named Hella, who worked on a oil rig, and she was very meticulous about what she wanted. Essentially, it's like, right, she designed every little detail. She put her whole everything into this house. It was her everything, and it was supposed to be her forever home. So she integrated like so much of herself into this home, but sadly she died at an oil rig. And now the house, basically, it's so intertwined with her that no one ever lives in that house for more than a week, because usually they get kicked out because it's looking for Hella, not anyone else. But it latched on to Susan because Susan reminded the house of Hella, both physically and spiritually. We even saw in the scene, because you notice that when Luke's looking at, you see Hella in a red jacket in this very particular picture, because she like had moved in and that's also why it has the week thing of kicking people out, because that's when it kind of takes a week to suss people out, because Hella had only moved in the house for like a week before she died. But yeah, like at one point in the episode, you see Susan looking at a photo on her desk, and then all of a sudden you see someone kind of in a red jacket walking by in the photo. I'm like, what's that about? I thought that was supposed to, I didn't know what to really make of that. I was like, is that supposed to be Susan's spirit there? But like, what's the red jacket? It's like, no, it's meant to be Hella. And I was like, that's so interesting tying that all in like that. But either way, the whole team comes together to try and save Susan from this house situation. So Luke tried to make it seem like, right, you've pushed everyone away, said some terrible things to Zoe, August, and Phil, so you don't have to worry about it anymore. They're just gonna go. I just want to say my goodbyes to Susan, and I'll leave you two alone. I want to make up for mistakes I made. And obviously the whole team is working together. Phil's trying his exercising. Obviously Zoe tried to destroy the home device, but that obviously doesn't do it. But it was just meant to distract the house long enough so that everyone could do their things. August and Rochelle are using their device, but it doesn't work. When I think maybe on any other person it probably would have been enough, but the problem is this thing's inside of Susan, and Susan's got powers, so she was able to fight back with her pyrokinesis. So, and we had Luke outside the house. I was curious what he was doing, and it's like, right, once you saw someone walking in distance, I was like, it's Hella. He summoned her. He was able to call her spirit. And it's like, right, something needs to kind of be fixed. I'm glad you showed up and were able to help. So the house, the moment, like now that Susan and Hella and the house inside of her is like, oh my god, it's you, and they hug, and now it's not only like, it's like the two of them are found a union. So the house spirit, I think, is gone. Like all the house has been exorcised. So I don't think, like, later on they're moving Elsa into the place. I mean, granted, she needed a new place anyway because they were adamant about tearing down her place. And it's like, yeah, because of Lomax and Zoe, they were able to get her in 12 hours before like the bulldozer showed up. Beautifully worked out in the end. I also love, I think that title of this episode is Letting Go, which is very poetic considering that's a major theme. I love that it's actually built off of last episode too, because there was a Zion situation of, hey, you gotta learn to let go, to love someone enough to let go, and that ends up being a continuous theme into this. Because first time since getting his powers back, Luke ends up going to the bowling alley and talks to his dad. And his dad's like, right, I'm actually ready to move on. Like, I know you've done everything. You talked to your mom and everything, so you're in a good place. But I think it's time for me to go. My unfinished business is I wanted to be around long enough to make sure you were okay, so that you could realize that any like stuff that was going on wasn't your fault. And now he ended up, now like him and his mom being in a better place put them in a position where he no longer carries that guilt, and his dad's like, it's okay for me to move on, but Luke doesn't want to let him go. It's like, no, I can't. He's like, I need to move on to see what's next, but it's like, I don't want to let you go. Like, I'm going to need you. And it's like, you don't need me anymore. I've done what I needed to do. My business was making sure you were going to be okay, and I know you will be. But Luke couldn't let him go, and that ties into the end where like everyone's going their separate ways. I think it's ironic. The person I was so certain, I was like, oh, we're probably going to, like, Lomax is probably going to leave by the end. It's like, no, she's the only one, ironically enough, staying behind, because August gets an offer by Rochelle of like the great stuff that they can do, especially with the resources at her business, like what you could do. Zoe, I forgot to talk about it last episode, has decided she's going to go down the lawyer route, but granted, that's going to be 3 years of law school, so she might pop in here and there, but she definitely won't be around a lot. Phil's moving to Rome. It's like literally everyone except for Lomax is leaving. I mean, and Susan, so it is kind of sad. The moment they get Susan back, now we have the situation of everyone else is, leaving, so... And also, Luke had the surprise of like, right, making Susan a partner. It's Roman and Ireland agency now, and because obviously he had apologized for the mistake, and and that ties into it. And he'd even said at the end that I learned from my mistake with Susan of loving someone so much that I was like just too unwilling to let go, and that's what it was. He was kind of pushing Susan he was kind of pushing Susan away because he was kind of dealing with all this stuff, and it's just he didn't handle that situation properly, and it's like, right, I've got to learn to let go a little bit, and obviously for him that also meant saying goodbye to his dad, which I thought that was a beautiful ending. It's like, right, I'm never going too far away. Like, as long as you keep me here in your heart, like, I'm always going to be there for you, son. And it's like, so, and he's like, well, we've never been huggers, so, instead of goodbye, it's a see you later, which is very interesting because my dad kind of has that same philosophy. Anytime we've ever talked on the phone, he's not a big fan of just saying goodbye because I think it sounds too permanent, so it's always like a talk to you later. He prefers that over a goodbye. Like, and I'm always very conscious of that now. I don't know if I'm definitely not as conscious as that with my other family, but I think it's ingrained in my head now. Like, I always say that with my dad now in particular. So dad kind of hit very home, like very hit very at home there. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so this is the last time it's ironic, like just got his dad back just to kind of have to lose him again. But it's like, no, you're always going to be there. I'm always going to carry a little bit of you. And now me and mom are in a better place. I can probably finally tell mom like, oh, yeah, I talked to dad and he moved on and he's happy to know about where we are. So I think that's kind of a beautiful situation. And like I said, just kind of a bummer that everyone's kind of going their separate ways. They are going to hire new staff. So that's definitely going to be interesting. We saw them kind of juggling all this stuff without Susan around this season and how much of a struggle that was. I mean, Luke's got his mojo back, but even that's going to only cover so much. But once again, we got Lomax around. I know it's probably crazy because like Lomax was only in the show. The actress who's playing her has only been around, 4 episodes maybe? But it's still a thing of, I was like, yeah, but there's always that situation of like by the end of the season, they might have just made her decide to go back to her. But it's like, she's not, I mean, the whole point of like her first official day was like, oh, at the end of the day, she was like, yeah, like, no, don't get rid of like, don't screw up a paying gig. So, but I'm glad we're going to keep Lomax around for any potential future stories. So, I should also talk about the ending where obviously the last message in the episode is in memory of Will Hapgood. Will Hapgood was part of the special effects team for this series. He was titled, if you look in the credits of the show, he's credited as the special effects coordinator. So, rest in peace. I think I saw someone who's associated with the show having the saying that he made you kind of want to like he's the person responsible for making you believe in magic. I saw a post on that, so I thought that was kind of beautiful. Which is, it's always sad when when I'm sure like any show loses a member of that, that family and that unit. And I'm curious whether I'd have to look into it. I'm curious whether there's shows he worked on, but I saw that at the end of the episode, so just kind of wanted to add context if you were curious about it. I'm always curious about those situations. I'm always, once again, I guess it's very poetic. I always feel weird saying that in this regard, but like I'm not the biggest fan of looking into death related stuff. It just always kind of, I don't know. I always shy away from death, so I try not to look into those too often. But sometimes, it's out of cure, and I think it's also the reason why I'm saying ironic and poetic, because like the nature of what the show is about, so it feels, I don't know. There's some, not silver lining, but there's something beautiful about the nature of what the show is, and kind of having that memory of someone, and just remembering the life that is someone rather than just the end. It's all of who they were. Don't focus on the end, focus on the life that they lived, and and whatever that encapsulated in the lives and the people that were touched. It's that type of stuff. I know I'm getting all like sappy and stuff, but it just kind of, I don't know, I get a little existential about death and stuff like that. That's all. And then just like, that's why I was saying it's poetic, just because of the nature of what the show is all about. At the time I'm recording this, which is like 2:51 in the morning, it's like December 11th, I believe. Yes, obviously I'm getting to this a couple days late, but even at the time of recording this, it has not been confirmed whether or not the show is coming back for a third season. I hope it does. It ends off on a note where it's like, okay, there's not too much left open-ended, but it's like, no, I want the show to go on for as long as possible. Once again, my good old benchmark is if we can 5 seasons. If not, at minimum, I'd like to go. I think 5 is a good benchmark for any show to be able to go that length. But I think if we could at least get to at least season 4, maybe. I just want the show to end on a note where it's like, hey, you end on your own terms. Like I said, things are in a good enough spot. Like if we didn't get another season, it'd suck, but at least it'd be a little more like, okay, everything is good. Not too much of a cliffhanger. The entire group's going their separate ways, and we're not resolved with everyone's stories. But it's still like, it's better than nothing, I guess. If I have to, I'm not saying I'd be accepting of it to some degree, but it's like, no, I want the show to keep going. I hope that it keeps going, because I'd love to get more of the show, because I really enjoy this show. I don't know. Obviously, the biggest thing is going to be ratings. Obviously, with the WGA and SAG after strike, there's a lot of shows that are going to get are in the process of getting the axe or gotten the axe. So hopefully the show doesn't end up being a casualty of that. Once again, it also comes down to like viewership, and obviously, once again, Sci-Fi's not shy away from like canceling something. It's not like, oh, they hold on to everything. It's like, there's some things that just never, really get their chance to shine. And I think the show, it's getting its time to shine a little, but I'd like it to have the opportunity to shine even brighter and be able to kind of continue. Like I said, I mean, if you can make it end in the 3rd season, sure, but I'd hope 4 or 5 is what I'm got my fingers crossed for and hoping for. So I hope the show gets to go on for a little while longer. So I'd love to see where the show would go in a season 3 and beyond. Especially because of the Megan element too, which I thought was interesting. Bringing that back up in the very end of the season. Once again, very poetic, considering like, hey, gets his powers back, and Megan called him at the beginning of the episode. He tried to call her back in the middle, and she calls him back at the very end after he resolves things with his dad. But then, like, he's getting a call about someone, I guess, like, maybe someone else's house situation being what it is. Like, oh, they're all dead. I don't know if it's, like, connected to the place that she's currently living in, or whether that's more, like, related. Like, oh, someone went to her for help about their house because there's a history behind it. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see where things kind of go on that front, to see where Luke and her end up, especially because he's finally taking those steps forward, I think, in his life in a lot of capacities, both in a work profession type of way, but also just in a personal way, where just everything with his mom, everything with his dad, and just his, not only just the work relationship with the people around him, because they're not just colleagues, they're his friends. So a lot of that. So that's really all I wanted to talk about. So I mean, I'm kind of running my mouth, so I do apologize. But either way, once again, hopefully, fingers crossed, we get a season 3 and beyond, but we'll just have to wait to see. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.